How to Create a Glitch Monologues Season 27 Chapter 3. This is Season 27 of How to Create a Glitch in the Matrix Monologues Episode 3. In this episode, we will be hypothesizing the interrelation between parsimony and the energy associated with tasks. The purpose of this analysis will be to explore our episode on disappearing object phenomenon in Season 26 Episode 3. In our episode on disappearing object phenomenon in Season 26 Episode 3, we discussed how parsimony explains why history reflects a particular pathway from point A to point B wherein an object, in that example, a phone, exists in one place as opposed to another. That principle was used to explain disappearing object phenomenon, and the peculiar disappearing and reappearance of an object in another place. I don't want to go too far backwards with this episode. Suffice it to say, in that case, the pathway wherein you smoked 2 cigarettes and had an orange energy drink was the pathway where your phone was left in your jacket pocket as opposed to your pants pocket. The pathway which you remember is not favored by parsimony. Now, in the last episode we talked about how there must be some kind of propellant to switch from one parallel dissonant consensuality to another. In this episode, I would like to hypothesize an explanation for that propellant, using the example from Season 26 Episode 3. To start off, the analysis begins with the question, why would parsimony choose the pathway which involves consumption of an energy drink, as opposed to coffee, and smoking of 2 cigarettes, instead of 1? The answer may be simpler than it first appears. Imagine that each task, that is, smoking 1 cigarette or 2, and drinking a coffee or an orange energy drink, represents a separate transformation of energy. The path of parsimony seems to favor the pathway which consumes the most energy. In that, the nicotine in your bloodstream resulting from the second cigarette increases your body's heart rate and therefore energy use. The orange energy drink has more energy in it than the coffee and a greater impact on your heart rate through the amount of caffeine in it. Thus, if we imagine that at point A, just after smoking the second cigarette, your heart rate and body's consumption of energy is a certain value. And we imagine that at point B, just after consuming the orange energy drink, your heart rate and body's consumption of energy is a certain value. We can hypothesize that the potential energy accretive to your body at point A and point B is higher than in the intervening periods. Thus, if you imagine that our hypothetical ramp exists at point A and point B, then we can suppose that the path of parsimony merely follows the curvature of potential to kinetic energy, the intervening period acting like the flattened part of a curve between 2 ramps. What I am saying is, perhaps the propellant necessary for parsimony to skip outside the ordinary linear timeline which we are accustomed to into the non-linear path of disappearing object phenomenon is the potential energy of our body's processes, created by the energy we consume and excrete. In other words, when our bodies achieve a high enough potential energy, the ball, so to speak, or the train, can skip out of the railings and find a non-linear pathway from point A to point B. If this is true, then we can hypothesize that the precise calculation of the potential energy implicit in the consumption of that extra cigarette or energy drink over coffee could generate an approximate quantity associated with a leap from one parallel timeline to another. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.